All right, so let's kick it to the women's tournament. So, again, we were talking last week. It's like not as much, really going on. Not too much foolishness going on. A lot of teams that are expecting them to win, they win. So when it came down to the Elite Eight, wasn't really too much surprising. Even in the Sweet 16, you had some upsets, right? So you had a lot of 3 seeds over 2 seeds, so Oregon State over Notre Dame, NC State, they're in the Final Four as well, over Stanford, and then LSU, of course, over UCLA. So you noted here, no 2 seeds made it to the Elite Eight. Ohio State was already out of there. So these aren't really like super surprising. And, we said it last week, and you said it pretty well. We were talking about it. Like, nobody really wants to see like those lower seeds in the Elite Eight in the Final Four in the women's tournament. Like, we want to see these top teams with these top stars, right? You want to see the LSU, you want to see the Carolina, you want to see the Iowa, you want to see the Texas, you want to see UConn. Like, you want to see those top seeds because those are, pretty much far and away the best teams. Whereas in men's, I don't think, there's obviously those top teams are great, but the talent disparity, I would compare it more to the NFL rather than, you can compare women's college basketball to more like college football, right? That there's a bigger talent disparity from that upper echelon to the bottom. So we got pretty much what we wanted. Elite Eight, really good, at least good for me. They had SC get a win against Oregon State, knocking them out. You had NC State upsetting Texas. So NC State, of course, now you got 2 teams in the Final Four. UConn last night, they beat USC. I'll give you a chance to talk about that one. But most polarizing game, of course, Iowa, LSU, rematch of the national championship from last year. There's so much to talk about with this game, and honestly, obviously Caitlin Clark is going to be coming back next year. Angel Reese may or may not. So, of course, that'll be the last time they play against each other. But honestly, these 2 teams, they can play against each other 100 times. I would watch it 100 times. Like, this is a true marquee high-level matchup in college basketball, men or women's. And that's undisputed. I love to see the ratings from last night for that game. Probably crazy. Probably eclipsed the national title from last year, of course. But there's just a little too much nonsense heading into this game, to be honest with you. Like, at the end of the day, this is basketball. We had an article from the Post about Kim Mulkey. That's one thing. Then they had the whole article about the LSU team from the LA Times, with the UCLA game. You can, you studied this, obviously. you can talk about, the sexism there. You can talk about the possible racism there. I mean, I can tell you right now, dirty debutantes, which was what was said in the article, referring to LSU. Yeah. I'm telling you right now, if you're on your school Wi-Fi, don't look that up. That is not something school Wi-Fi, work Wi-Fi. You do not want to look that up. So for that to be said about some, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, even if they talk a lot, like, that just got out of hand. Let's be honest. It's a little ridiculous. I see people liking it kind of to, the Magic Johnson, versus Larry Bird national championship, all the way back in like 79, how that kind of played out and everything. And
yeah.
Okay, I get the comparison, but it is like, why is it 40 years later and we're still 45 years later and we're still kind of on that same kind of timing with these race issues coming up in a basketball game? And I realize that, majority LSU is black, majority Iowa is white, but like, to turn into a white versus black, good versus evil, like, what is wrong with you? So that like, at the end of the day, this is basketball. So these are teenagers and young adults playing basketball. Like, let's calm down. Like, the players on the court respect each other. Fans, people around it, they should too. So that's just my little rant. But I'll turn it over to you to kind of just get more into this game, because I mean that's really what everybody's wanting to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important rant to give on the show. So it's obviously I've said throughout the tournament, I think so far that I'm at Clemson. I've been here for a little while. I'm doing my master's now, working on my history major, doing history stuff. But specifically, I'm working on gender and sports because I'm a history major. I can't do modern stuff like LSU and Iowa, but I am working on like women's basketball and race issues and stuff like that. So I think that these conversations are very important to have, and that's kind of the point of my research is like why are we still dealing with these same things as we go. But with that aside, this game was probably the best one of both tournaments so far. It brought in, I saw the post today, 12.3 million viewers, which is pretty big for
Nice.
college basketball. Um, and yeah, I mean, this game was good. It was up and down. It was not a clear cut Iowa victory. Obviously, it's only 94 to 87. Iowa wins. It's not like a massive thing anyway. But Iowa started out hot. They come out and they took a pretty early lead. They were hitting their threes. Caitlin Clark playing a little bit of disrespectful basketball. I don't think it's actually disrespectful, but the way she hits some of the threes is just like, what are you supposed to do about that? But then out of nowhere, Clark lost her mind for a little bit and started throwing the ball straight to Angel Reese over and over again.
Yeah.
LSU's offense really good at one, getting offensive boards, two, playing defense and using the defense to then fuel the offense. So their fast break offense was good. They had plenty of fast breaks from some poor decisions by Iowa. And next thing you know, after Iowa had a pretty big lead, and then LSU took a little bit of a lead, we're going into halftime 45-45, and we've got a real game here on our hands. Massive matchup, big threes, big defensive moves the whole way through. Then the third quarter starts, and Caitlin Clark took flight. It ends up getting her way into a 41-point outing. Pretty insane. 41, 12, 7 is a pretty big stat line. Had 2 steals on a block as well. Gabby Marshall for them played pretty good defense. But the real thing is I think that Kim Mulkey probably knows, right, that you're going to get 30, 40 from Caitlin Clark. And LSU, at the beginning of the game, wasn't putting. Let me scale it back and let me discuss Kim Mulkey in a basketball way. I'm not sure that she had a plan in this game. That's what I
Oh,
felt like
whoa.
watching the game. Um,
All right.
and I say that because as good of a coach as she is, and as good as she is at being able to use her stars, and some of this could be the players too, for a little bit early on in the game, Andrew Reese wasn't really getting the ball. Some of the shots she took were just because she got an offensive rebound, which does happen a lot for LSU. But even Angel at one point like screamed at her team, was like, "Give me the ball." So she puts up 17. Also has a great stat line: 17, 20 rebounds. Just massive game. 4 assists as well, 2 steals, 3 blocks. Um, Ends up fouling out towards the end. I'm not sure her last foul was deserving of being fouled out, but the game was kind of over by then. However, she doesn't get the ball a lot. And then her teammates, Florida Johnson is the one who's going to lead them. She shoots excellently, 10 for 18. And Michaela Williams also had a great game. Nisa Morrow, all of them much more cohesive LSU game, except for Haley Van Leth, which I'll get into. But really, my thing about Kim Mulkey's plan is I'm not certain how she watched LSU, or not LSU, Iowa beat Louisville last year with Haley Van Lith as Caitlin Clark's primary defender, who gets torched. Um, then LSU beats Iowa for the championship, puts on some pretty good defensive adjustments to make sure Clark does not take them down solely, and then they get Haley Van Lith in the offseason, which is a massive move. LSU is really good at playing in the paint, but that gives you a huge 3-point threat to add to your team. And then they match up with Iowa, and Kim Mulkey's idea is to make Haley Van Lith the primary defender for Caitlin Clark for all 40 minutes of the basketball game, or all 30 that Van Lith played. Um, I don't think I really understood it, and it wasn't working, and it had to be a horrible night for Haley, right? Because she's not being able to really do much defensively. Even when you're playing good defense on a player like Clark or even Angel Reese, it can be tough to really stop them from scoring. And so she's not doing good defensively. She shoots 2 for 10, 1 for 6 from the 3-point line, so not getting a whole lot going on there either. And I just not sure that I saw Kim Mulkey's plan of put the shortest player and the one who we got for offense on Caitlin Clark and keep all of our defensive people who we already had off on the side defending other people. And that's where I think this game ends up getting out of hand. Caitlin Clark is going to get 40, but with all the other kind of weird stuff going on, and just the way that Iowa started opening up the floor with the passing game, what really kills them is not the 40 that they end up getting put on them from Caitlin Clark, but the fact that Kate Martin, great player, obviously Iowa's second best scorer, but Kate Martin gets 21, and then Sydney Fulter is going to get 16 right there going at Angel Reese and a few of those other, star bigs on that team. So maybe saying that Mulkey had no plan is a little crazy, but the defensive scheme that I saw was just weird, and the delay to get the ball to Angel Reese, and then Angel Reese tweaks her ankle, and obviously things shift a little bit there. The game was just a little weird from LSU standpoint, and they stayed in it. They had a good chance to try to get a win. Florida Johnson, especially towards the end of the game, started to shoot very well. Not that she was shooting poorly before the game. Most of her missed shots were threes. I think that also hurts, is that Iowa is a big three-point team. LSU couldn't answer that way. They needed to kind of get back into playing their own ball, and some of that is giving the ball to Angel Reese more, and some of it I think is not having Haley Van Lith be Caitlin Clark's defender. You've got much better defenders on that team. Let Haley Van Lith just go somewhere else. Obviously, for Iowa, right, they have a great defender in Gabby Marshall. They're not trying to make her run the ball. They did play her for 40 minutes to go run around and play defense, and she did pretty good. Had some two steals. Also almost forced a steal on the inbound pass a few times. But Gabby Marshall was out there to play defense to do one thing. I think Haley Van Lith should have been there to play offense and not get her morale destroyed by having her be Clark's primary defender the entire night. She's too short, I think, for that. There's just a weird height advantage for Clark there, and I think it just was a morale destroyer. But this game was great. Highlight plays after highlight plays. Every single part of this game was fun to watch. I think it's the most fun I've had watching this tournament. I've yapped for a lot on this one, so I'll pass it back to you. But I am also a fan of. I am a UConn women's basketball fan, so I have thoughts on that game too. But before we move on, I'll let you kind of chime in here on the actual game for LSU and Iowa. Just a really good basketball game that I think might have been a little mismanaged by Kim Mulkey.
Yeah, I mean, first off, when we first came out in this game, LSU just kept making mistakes over and over, like getting bad shots. You mentioned Caitlin Clark, basically just throwing it right to Angel Reese like she was a teammate. I guess that was really the only criticism you can have for Caitlin in this one. Once she cleaned that up, she was fine. But LSU just made so many mistakes early on, just bad shots. I mean, couldn't really get anything going. Then, moved further into the first, Angel started doing her thing. Both teams started hitting some good shots. Iowa's with the threes, LSU's with some. So really good first quarter. And then after that, it kind of just set the pace for the game. And literally, what was it? I think it was like 5 minutes into the game, not even 5, is when they took Haley out. Like, clearly, I mean, you pretty much said all you could say right there, about that. But clearly that was not, if you had to take her out that fast, she probably shouldn't have been on her in the first place. Like, and obviously Kim Mulkey knows more about basketball than both of us combined, but we can clearly see, like, hey, it ain't working. And you mentioned it that they played last year, when Haley was back in Louisville, they played against her. They played against Haley. And then the same team, and Kim Mulkey said it herself, hey, even last year when we beat them, we couldn't really guard Caitlin. Like, we just had the better team. I mean, that's really honest here. Now, in this one, Caitlin obviously went off, 40 points and everything, was shooting darn near half court, which is just ridiculous. But she had Kate Martin bring in 21. She had Sydney come in with 16. I mean, you had people come in and help. So it wasn't just Caitlin in this one. And so the fact that Caitlin was making all these shots, basically abusing Haley Van Lith. And I texted you, I was like, look, I really hope she does not see Twitter, because they're killing her on Twitter. And Twitter isn't the real world, and it's not everything. But I mean, they were objectively right. Like, it was just a bad matchup from beginning to end. Like, there might have been a couple possessions there. There was that one possession where that didn't actually happen, where Caitlin was inbounding, and Haley was able to force it, the violation there. That was a dub, but like, she had like 3 dubs and about 50 L's in this one. So, it just wasn't a good strategy. Obviously, Angel getting hurt, it didn't seem like it affected her. Like, obviously she was not nearly as good after that, but it didn't seem like she was like stumbling around like the whole game or anything like that. But clearly, she had that, once she got going, she had that little hot start, and then trailed off, later on in the game. Ended up fouling out, pretty much when the game was mostly done. So, yeah, I feel like there are just too many mistakes coaching wise. And I'm not, again, Kim Mulkey, she knows a ton. She's been a winner at every level, everywhere she's been. But they tried, first of all, putting Haley on Caitlin was a mistake. Trying to run the offense a little too much through Haley. That, Flau'jae, Michaela, Anissa, like they were an Angel, of course. Like pretty much everybody, all the starters, they were on tonight or last night, except for Haley. So, maybe I've seen the argument that, hey, if Flau'jae was on Caitlin, she would have been more tired offensively. Like maybe, but Haley wasn't working at all. So yeah, I mean, at some point you just got to switch game plans, and even when they did, it didn't make that much of a difference. So yeah, this one at the end of the day was Caitlin Clark doing her thing. We expected that, but she had teammates step up as well, and that's really the difference between this game and last year's game. So definitely another classic. You said it, 12 million views. So definitely, I think that's has to be the most by a college woman for sure. So breaking records once again. Definitely glad there's more eyes on the sport there. Just not too happy with all the other stuff that's being said. But to get a little bit more positive here, I'm going to let you go ahead and take the reins back here with UConn and USC. You, of course, are a UConn fan. Nice to see Paige back in the swing of things. It feels like it's been so long, since she first started, but she started during that COVID year and everything. So, it's just her fourth year, third year, full year playing. But she's finally back playing well. Juju Watkins on the other side, she's definitely going to be a star. Like people are measuring her up against Caitlin Clark now. So I mean, it's hey, I love it for the game, right? We did have these stars, 10 years ago, Breanna Stewart, Sabrina, Brittany Griner, but those teams, they were just killing people. Like it wasn't nearly competitive back then. I don't remember how long UConn had that streak. They were like years. I mean, it was like 100-something games before they lost. So seeing it'll be a lot more competitive now definitely helps with the stardom. Nobody's really getting killed like that. And UConn's still great. It's just that they're not going on runs like that. So I think that is definitely good for the game to have all these young stars in there. We could talk about how it'll go once it gets in the WNBA, but definitely great for the game. And I'll let you finish it out with UConn. I know you're happy about that.
Yeah, I've got plenty of thoughts on WNBA's need for expansion and to let these star players kind of stay star players. But as a UConn fan, when I started being a UConn fan, it was just a little bit before I went to college. So definitely probably a little bit of a bandwagon-y time to join. But I joined at a great time to start to suffer because UConn has been plagued with injuries. They've not been on that as crazy of a run as for most of the time that I've been watching. And it's not just Paige, a lot of other players out. But they play a great game, and I think that the biggest issue that for USC in this game is that they're led by a freshman, and Juju Watkins is amazing. She's a really good player. She put on a hell of a game in this game. Just kind of came up a little bit short, but not for a little bit. They came out fighting. Watkins herself put up 29. She shot kind of her usual shooting splits. 9 for 25 is not horrible, but it's not amazing. That's kind of what I usually see out of Juju Watkins, though, is that she's a good shooter. She also, like Zach Edey, she gets to the line more than any other player in women's college basketball, which is pretty impressive for a freshman to have that kind of that kind of whistle going along with her. But she plays a really good, heavily 3-point focused game that can then kind of shift when she starts to get into the paint. And I say heavily 3 points. She shot 25 times, only 6 for threes. But she puts up 29 and 10. Mackenzie Forbes right there with her 24, 3 and 3. You get 11 from Ryan Marshall. They played a really good game. UConn is just a little bit more of a complete team defensively, and that's really what it comes out to. Now, offensively, it's a story of two players, one of whom I really want to be able to sing the praises of this one, even though it's a little bit of a free throw game for her in this one. Paige Beckers, of course, goes 11 for 23. Just a little better than Watkins' shooting split. 3 for 6 from 3. She puts up 28 points. Gets herself 10 rebounds and 6 assists as well, with 3 steals and 2 blocks as well. Very well-rounded stat line. But Aaliyah Edwards, I think, is kind of an unsung hero for UConn all the time. The whole time she's been a player for UConn. And so in this game, she puts up 24, gets 6 rebounds, gets an assist, a block. The issue is that, I mean, for certain basketball fans, I think it's a little odd or a little rough too when you have a good game and half of it's free throws. But she did have 10 free throws for those 24 points. But she shot 7 for 13. She's going to mainly be shooting from the point or from the paint, from the point, from the paint.
Yeah.
Notably a little quieter in this game, despite playing 40 minutes, as Nika Mule just puts in 8. And then next best contributor from there is probably one of the hardest names in sports. Ice Brady puts up 8 points. I am, as a UConn fan, sometimes in disbelief that Ice Brady is a real player that has the name Ice Brady. It just kind of is crazy. What a hard name. I would hate to have to guard somebody with that much of an aura just on their name. But UConn it gets an impressive win here, I think, because they end up in such deep foul trouble. Aaliyah Edwards, 4 fouls. Nika Mule, 4 fouls. KK Arnold, 4 fouls. Ice Brady, 3 fouls. Ashlyn Sade had 2 fouls, both in the first half. And half of this roster is injured. And so if they start getting in foul trouble, I genuinely do not know what Gino can do if he loses too many of these players to fouling, because he doesn't have many healthy players to throw back in. And so impressive kind of resilient victory in this one, as they got kind of bullied by USC a little bit early on. They were down up 15-6. Couldn't really get the offense going. Couldn't get defense going without getting fouled. KK Arnold, big defensive impact. However, had 3 fouls in the first half. Finished the game before, so cleaned it up in the second half for sure. But they were definitely in big trouble. I mean, they said it on the halftime broadcast as well. They're like, this might be Gino's toughest task ever, is to figure out how to manage like 3 or 4 players having 2 or 3 fouls by halftime. That's just a big thing. And obviously, remember, for college, it's just 5 and you're out of there because they play a little less time. So definitely a scary game. But USC, I feel like, is going to have a really bright future, depending on how long Juju Watkins decides to stay in college. If she wants to stay there for that pass to the WNBA, or she's going to end up going somewhere else. They played a really good game. They're really good offensively. I think that UConn was a little bit more of a complete team, and not scoring wise, right? Scoring wise, USC had a more kind of comprehensive contribution, but UConn defensively, kind of passing the ball around, just a little more complete. Paige Beckers and Leah Edwards, both very well rounded. I think that maybe a little biased as a UConn fan, but I think that Becker's game is a very well-rounded game, and I think she's complemented by really good defenders like KK Arnold, and Ashlyn Shade has been pretty good. Ice Brady is a pretty solid player, and then Leah Edwards is a monster in the paint. So yeah, I believe that this is a really good, resilient team, similar to the men's bracket. I think that this would be a little scary, but we have some huge matchups for this Final Four. I mean, Iowa and UConn is going to be crazy, right? We just got Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. Now we get Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers a few days later. Then South Carolina, red hot, kind of quietly rolling over all their opponents. Occasionally struggling a little bit, right? Like they almost blew a lead to Indiana. Didn't matter. They stayed up and came back and won 79-75. But Don Staley was sure to point out that they almost blew that lead in the post game presser. But NC State on a hot run on both groups here, looking to try to knock off South Carolina, and I just don't think that that's feasible, as South Carolina has been really complete. Same thing for last year, though. Right, they went undefeated all the way up until about this point, or to this point, and then they came up short. So I'm not sure if that happens again. I think Don Staley was a very resilient coach. NC State's going to be tough, though. Really tough star guard over there in North Carolina. Hoping to keep the fact that UConn and NC State are the only teams right now to have both to have their men's and women's team be in the Final Four. So that's kind of crazy. It's the first time in history that's happened. So South Carolina is just going to have to be able to kind of get it together and be sure that they don't let the star guards, specifically like Sanaya Rivers and Isaiah James, kind of cook them. And I think that South Carolina is built to not let that happen. So I know you're obviously South Carolina alum, and I'm sure still a big supporter of that women's basketball team. I think that you guys have a pretty good shot to make the championship, which would then give us, either way, you either get Caitlin Clark in South Carolina or Paige Beckers in South Carolina again, which was a little rivalry for a little bit until UConn sort of like fiddled out and just ended up on different sides of the bracket. But you got just like the men's, I think the men's has a really exciting Final Four. This one is a very exciting Final Four with a lot of star power. And I think that's because of what we talked about last week. Less upsets, bigger stars left in. This Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers matchup is going to be really good. And I think that what they put on display this past night was that both of their teams are really complete. and it's not just the Caitlin Clark and Paige Becker show, even if sometimes both of those players play as if it's just them. They're surrounded by pretty good facilitators, pretty good passer, or pretty good defenders, and otherwise pretty good scorers as well. So that's a tough one to pick. I'm gonna hope that UConn goes through. Funny enough, for my bracket, I actually picked Iowa, but I obviously am gonna hope that UConn pulls off that upset. And then South Carolina, NC State would be interesting and very big for the basketball world if NC State is able to get that upset. And obviously, it might not sound that crazy because they're a 3 seed, but South Carolina and UConn for the men's bracket are the kind of 1 seeds that just feel massive and much bigger than just a 1 seed. And I do think that it's going to be South Carolina versus somebody is what I'm thinking for the championship. But we could be shocked.
I'm hoping so. And, for me personally, either, South Carolina, Iowa, or South Carolina, UConn, either or. Definitely the exciting game. I'm hoping for Iowa, though, just to get that revenge. Iowa got their revenge against LSU. I think it's time for Carolina to get theirs.